All right, so this is our second Wednesday night in this series, taking questions, where we're taking up some of the hard questions that people are asking about the Christian faith. Tonight we're taking up this question: does Christianity contradict science? And as with many of these questions, there's a number of different directions that we could go. There would be a lot of ground that we could cover. I'm going to limit my the conversation tonight to things that were at least inspired by this new book by Janet Kellogg Ray called "Baby Dinosaurs on the Ark: The Bible and Modern Science and the Trouble of Making It All Fit." It's about 200 pages long. It's a very good book. It's very well written. She's an educator, a science educator, and a devout Christian. And she writes about both her faith and science in the book. I think the only thing I wish the book had was pictures. There were so many examples that she was giving of, layers of sediment and fossils and things like that. It would have been neat to see pictures of them. But I do recommend the book, and we will barely touch the surface of what she goes deep into in the book. So last week we talked about, is it Christianity against diversity? That video and my detailed notes are on our website. So if you want to take a look at those, you can. I have detailed notes tonight that won't be on the slides. And if you'd like that copies of that, that'll be on the website, I'm sure, by tomorrow morning.
Midnight.
Thursday or Friday, probably. They'll be up by tonight. That's right. Sam's going to go home and just put it up right now. 2 weeks from tonight, we're going to take up the third question: aren't there contradictions in the Bible? And that'll be September 29th. So next week is a week that we designate to our care groups. And so you should receive an email in the next several days from a care group leader saying, hey, let's get together and eat ice cream or pick apples or have a prayer time. Everyone should receive an email inviting you to a care group gathering. So we won't have this class next week, but 2 weeks from tonight we'll take up, aren't there contradictions in the Bible? Okay. So I'm actually starting at the end of this book because I think some of the things that she brings up at the end are helpful to sort of lead us into the conversation. So let's think about weather, the science of meteorology, rain and wind. Some of us don't know much about science. Some of us probably know everything about science. But in general, what do you know scientifically about weather, rain, wind? Where does it come from? How does it happen?
Well, science says a lot about weather, but we don't. I mean, we don't use what science says about weather. We talk about weather in our own terms. They're often almost anthropomorphic.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it just blows, it comes, it goes, it's hard, it's heavy. I mean, we just talk about it experientially.
Okay.
I mean, we might get as far as, isolated or scattered or, that kind of thing. But it's pretty experiential. It's a great opening question.
Yeah, I think we're describing it, but not necessarily understanding the causations and how one thing leads to the next and that sort of thing.
Okay.
Okay, as a person who took meteorology in college, there's a lot there, okay? There's a lot. There's more than the average person thinks there is. So I get really bent out of shape when people talk about somebody was off by, 5 degrees or whatever, because just you know, you just need to dive in and see how complex it is and see that you're lucky that you get what you get. I mean, there is a lot of cause and effect, but because it's so, because the earth is like, okay, things happen from high pressure to low pressure, but then the earth spins. And so things happen differently. And then this happens and that happens. And, you know, there's jet streams that they only discovered during World War II. And anyway, there's a lot of science there. There's a lot.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, but my point is conversationally, we don't usually use that.
Yeah.
Conversationally, the weatherman does.
Mhm.
I don't have those conversations
You're-
because I go for the science.
You're too informed. Yeah.
I'm too informed. Yeah, I am.
Okay, so we talk about weather experientially. We also watch the weather on TV, and we understand, at least to some degree, what the weather person, what the meteorologist is saying to us, and we're familiar with words like high pressure, low pressure, and jet stream, and things like that. So here's a point. The vast majority of Christians today believe in, accept the science of meteorology to some degree, one degree or another, despite the fact that our own scriptures describe these things very differently, right? So a text like Psalm 135, he it is who makes the clouds rise at the end of the earth, who makes lightnings for the rain and brings forth the wind from his storehouses. So literally, what is this scripture telling us about the weather?
That God's up there directing it.
Yeah. He's making it happen. He's got some storehouse, right? Some storage unit somewhere in heaven, bringing out the wind from there.
Yeah, but it's also kind of what comes, it comes.
What do you
Because he's gonna, I mean, it doesn't say why or what or anything. It just says it is.
Okay. Similar text in Psalm 147. He covers the heavens with clouds. He prepares rain for the earth. He makes grass grow on the hills. So we accept scriptures like this, and we accept the science of meteorology. You don't find many, I'm sure it's happening somewhere, but you don't find many Christians protesting or debating the science of meteorology, posting on social media that we should reject what our weatherman says or weatherwoman says. We believe in or accept that science, and we understand what's being described in these texts. Why don't we have a problem with the apparent contradiction between the science of meteorology and the texts like these?
Well, I think that we accept this as kind of a poetry. And so poetry is more fluid, and understanding is more like, okay, what's going on behind this? So behind this is that God is in control of everything. Or he's the source. Maybe that's a better word than control, but he's the source of all. So if he's the source of creation, obviously weather is a part of that creation.
Yeah. So these are statements of ultimate causation, ultimate source, God's providential use of natural laws that he created that create weather patterns, things like this.
Yeah, we don't see it as a contradiction.
Yeah.
We just, I mean, he's the one that made everything work the way it works. Just because there are other factors to it, doesn't mean that he didn't create the way it works.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, wrong direction. All right. So let's take up another issue. What does science say about conception and pregnancy? Let's leave this at least PG-13, please. I mean, just generally, what do we understand scientifically about conception and pregnancy, the development of a fetus?
Very little. And again, it's couched in poetry.
Science.
Hmm?
Science.
Oh, okay. Oh, what does science say about it? I'm kind of thinking the Bible.
Well, we know that sperm has to enter the egg and then it attaches to the uterine wall and it develops.
Yeah.
I mean, we know kind of those kind of vague things.
I swear, I heard Deborah say, unbiblical.
Oh, my.
Right, and I don't know if they still do, but back in the day, everybody got the big thick book, What to Expect When You're Expecting.
Mhm.
It was filled with all the, collected wisdom and knowledge about what's happening in the body and.
What the baby looks like at this point, how big it is.
Yeah,
12
yeah.
weeks and 14 weeks.
Yeah, it's a walnut.
Yeah,
a
every piece
grapefruit,
of fruit imaginable.
Yeah.
It is used to describe the baby.
Yeah.
At each stage.
And I guess the science of that is growing and growing and growing. We're understanding more about genetics, understanding what stage, almost like to what day genetics, what is happening genetically.
Mhm.
Almost every day they know those sorts of things too. So it's pretty interesting, actually.
Yeah, and so in general, the vast majority of Christians around the world today accept scientific knowledge about conception and pregnancy, despite the fact that our own scriptures use statements like this, Psalm 131, you formed my inward parts, you knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. So why is that? Why can we accept what science is teaching us about fetal development, and why can we accept what Psalm 139 is telling us about fetal development?
To me, these are consistent. It's just different genre of literature
Okay.
being knitted together. I mean, isn't that all the pieces come together to have it just right?
Okay.
Fearfully and wonderfully made. I mean, it's quite amazing, as you read the detailed parts of it, as much as one can understand who's not scientifically trained. But this just acknowledges that God's is, again, part of that creation process. God is the source of this life.
Yeah.
And the way it's unfolding.
So we can trust by faith that God is present and active in the midst of this process that is also described to us scientifically through observation and study. Okay, last one here on our way to the bigger question. What does science say about a sun-centered versus an earth-centered solar system? And what are we taught in elementary school about the shape of our solar system? What's at the center?
So,
The sun.
Sun. Yeah. So, the vast majority of Christians accept that science, that our solar system has the sun at its center, despite scriptures like these, Psalm 104, he set the earth on its foundation so that it should never be moved. The earth does not move. Or Joshua 10, the sun stood still and the moon stopped until the nation took vengeance on their enemies. Is this not written in the book of Jashar? The sun stopped in the midst of heaven and did not hurry to set for about a whole day. The implication being that it's the sun that moves. And so the sun stopped and the earth is always still. The earth is always stopped. So the vast majority of Christians accept what we're taught in elementary school about the sun at the center of the solar system, but our own scriptures seem to describe something very different. So what do we do with these texts?
Say, obviously, the people who are writing these stories, we write it from the basis of their knowledge, but there's still putting God at the center of their thoughts and how they see life unfolding. But that they're obviously going to write from their knowledge, which is not right at the time.
Yeah. Of course, this set the stage then for a large confrontation back in 1633 between the science of Galileo and the field of astronomy and the church, because when Galileo said, no, the sun is the center of the solar system, not the earth, the church, at least parts of the Catholic Church, took it as a denial of the truth of Scripture. And so he was condemned. But we've gotten past that. We see, well, it's okay to believe that the sun is the center of our solar system, and it's still okay for us to believe what scriptures like this are ultimately there to teach us.
Well, and I don't think in these instances, like, we don't expect the Bible to be a book of science, to scientifically explain things that people didn't know at the time. I mean, that's not the purpose of the Bible. The purpose is to reveal God.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't expect it to do that.
Right. So it raises the questions of what kind of literature is the Bible? Kathy, I see your hand.
Yeah, my point to this is always, when people wonder why the Bible is written in the science of the day, that makes sense. I mean, imagine if it was written in, say, 25th century science or 30th century science. I mean, we look at 21st century science and we think, well, it doesn't conform to this. It had to conform to what it was written in, and it conformed to a way that could convey information through all of the centuries over time. I mean, and it's just ridiculous to me that we would expect it to meet up with the science we understand today, when a century from now, we're going to understand science slightly differently. That's the nature of science.
Yeah, that's good. So I hear what you're saying. It's both timely and timeless. So
Right.
it's timely in the sense that it has to reflect the age in which it was written, because that's what it would take to communicate. And there's something timeless about it that endures across the generations.
I think this also speaks to how we approach scripture. If we kind of hold the beliefs that I was kind of taught what scripture was, it'd be like God inspired every word in it. Basic and inspired the translation to the King James Version. And so that each little detail was important, like if the detail wasn't right, then God was not telling the truth, or there's something amiss in this process. But if you take scripture a little more like, this is God's way of talking to us throughout the ages, and it doesn't need, then we get away from that need that every detail be truth telling. Factual.
And
it's truth telling, but it's not factual necessarily.
right. And that especially comes up here, which is sort of the primary focus of this book, Baby Dinosaurs on the Ark, which is the apparent contradiction between science and Christianity when it comes to the age of the earth and the universe and the origin of humanity and all the species of animals and plants. So mostly Genesis 1-9. And the sense that, okay, if Genesis 1-9 isn't literal, does that mean that we can't trust anything in the Bible or not? So let me, we're going to look at 5 camps that people seem to fall in the broader Christian world around this, on the way there. The major point that she makes in this book is the vast majority of the world's scientists accept that, based on things like the dating of rocks, ice rings, tree rings, the measurement of things like the speed of light, all of these she goes into immense detail. The earth and the universe are billions of years old. So the majority of the scientists across the world accept that, and they accept that species of animals and humans evolved from a common ancestor, what we call evolution. So that's generally what science accepts. And so the question is, well, does that contradict Christianity. So in one chapter, she reviews sort of 5 ways that people are answering this question today. So I think it's kind of helpful to see where people fall here. So I'm just going to walk through these briefly. The first one is called Young Earth Creationism, which essentially would say, yes, science and Christianity do contradict, and Christianity is always correct. Ken Ham would be a spokesperson for this view. The Institute for Creation Research, the Ark Encounter in Kentucky, it's life-size ark that you can go tour, and the Creation Museum. These all fall in the realm of Young Earth Creationism, which believes that Genesis is a literal, first-hand, historically accurate account of the origin of life and the universe. And if anything in science contradicts this literal, first-hand, historically accurate account in Genesis, then that science is wrong. So in this perspective, Genesis describes 6 literal 24-hour days of creation. And based on that and the genealogies in the Old Testament, the earth and the universe are 6,000 to 10,000 years old. And that is a staple view of this camp. The flood is a literal global event that decimated all life except the life of those on the ark. All organisms, including humans, were created instantly, separately, and in their present form. So no evolution as we would talk about evolution today. So that's Young Earth Creationism. Related to that is Old Earth Creationism, which would essentially say, yes, science and Christianity do contradict in some aspects. And anytime there's a contradiction, Christianity wins. Hugh Ross and John Clayton with his Does God Exist ministry fall into this camp. We had John Clayton come and do a Does God Exist seminar in Las Cruces, Mexico. Remember that?
You still doing this?
Yeah, we had them here.
No, really? Yeah. So this camp would say any conflict between the science and the Bible is ordered to the Bible. But this view believes that science will eventually agree with the Bible. This perspective accepts the scientific evidence for the age of the universe. So it says, yes, the universe is 14 billion years old. Earth is 4.5 billion years old. So that sets it apart from Young Earth Creationism. This perspective sees the word day in the Genesis account as not a 24-hour period, but a long, finite period of time. This perspective rejects all aspects of biological evolution. It says that Noah's flood destroyed all humans and animals not saved on the ark, and the flood was global in nature. That's number 2. Number 3, intelligent design. Similarly, yes, science and Christianity contradict, primarily in terms of evolution, and Christianity wins out in the end. The Discovery Institute in Seattle, Michael Bay, Stephen Meyer, William Dembski, these are all people or institutions associated with intelligent design. The primary argument from this camp is that the complexity that we see in nature could never have developed from evolution. And so the rejection of evolution. And it is evidence of a designer. So there is something sort of compelling about this camp, because it generally argues that we see complex design in nature, and therefore there must be a designer to that.
Why does that have to conflict with evolution?
I'm not exactly sure how to answer that question. I mean, the primary argument is that some things are so complex they can't be explained by evolution. Nothing would naturally evolve to that level of complexity.
Okay, so
Is the
I might
argument.
disagree with that statement, or a person might
Yeah.
disagree with that statement. Okay.
Right, yeah. Which, I mean, that's not necessarily a scientific
Mhm,
statement.
mhm.
So to some extent, it's saying evolution does occur, but God was there helping it along and deciding where it went and what happened. Or does it say, because it's so complex, evolution did not occur? I'm confused.
Yeah.
No,
I think there might be a merit to that at times.
I think intelligent design would accept some levels of evolution, but when it comes to these,
Not macroevolution.
yeah, maybe you could say micro, not macro evolution. Yeah. I am the son of an astrophysicist, but I am not a scientist. So,
The son and a stepson.
but I did read this book. Intelligent design allows for the possibility of a common ancestry, but assumes the descendants are designed and not the result of evolution. And intelligent design generally doesn't make any claims about Genesis or Noah's flood or the creation week in Genesis. Okay. This is where the author of this book is, Theistic Evolution, Evolutionary Creationism, which would say science and Christianity do not conflict. Both are right. We just have to understand them in their respective worlds there. Francis Collins would be a spokesperson for this perspective. It accepts all scientific evidence about the universe and life, evolution by natural selection, and the descent of all life from common ancestors are accepted. Science provides insight into how God creates, orders, and sustains the natural world. It accepts the scientific evidence of an ancient earth and ancient universe. It affirms God as creator and original cause of the natural world. It sees the Genesis account as written in the genre of ancient Near Eastern creation stories, of which there are many. Genesis is theology, not science or history. It accepts the scientific evidence for common ancestry of humans with all life. Theologically, it believes God endowed humans with his image and has a unique relationship with them. It rejects all arguments of a universal flood. There's a lot in this book about the flood. Noah's story is to be read as part of the genre of ancient Near Eastern flood stories, of which there are many. So this is where the author lands, and where essentially she's inviting all Christians to come to theistic evolution, evolutionary creationism, affirming the truth of both science and faith. And then the last camp is on the far end of the extreme from young Earth creationism, naturalism and scientism. So yes, Christianity and science do contradict, and science wins out. So young Earth creationism says the Bible's always got to win out. And naturalism and scientism says science always wins out. Richard Dawkins would be a primary spokesperson for this. Nahum Sarna has a book on Genesis called Understanding Genesis. I think it's probably one of the best books written about Genesis, helping us understand what kind of book it is and what we're supposed to get from it. This is a long quote from his opening chapter. Biblical man, despite his undoubted intellectual and spiritual endowments, did not base his views of the universe and its laws on the critical use of empirical data. He had not as yet discovered the principles and methods of disciplined inquiry, critical observation, or analytical experimentation. Rather, his thinking was imaginative, and his expressions of thought were concrete, pictorial, emotional, and poetic. Hence, it is a naive and futile exercise to attempt to reconcile the biblical accounts of creation with the findings of modern science. Any correspondence which can be discovered or ingeniously established between the two must surely be nothing more than a mere coincidence. Even more serious than the inherent fundamental misconception of the psychology of biblical man is the unwholesome effect upon the understanding of the Bible itself. For the net result is self-defeating. The literalistic approach serves to direct attention to those aspects of the narrative that reflect the time and place of its composition, while it tends to obscure the elements that are meaningful and enduring, thus distorting the biblical message and destroying its relevancy. So here's an Old Testament theologian, and I think he's making a pretty profound statement here, that to take Genesis, and especially the creation story, literally, is one, to misunderstand those who wrote it, and worse, it's to rob the story of its wonder and what it has to contribute to us. So he would stand very much against young Earth creationism, old Earth creationism, and maybe even intelligent design to a certain degree. So I think the invitation from Scripture is to consider what Genesis might tell us, even if it's not literal, and in light of other ancient Near Eastern creation stories. So some of you are familiar with this, some of you may not be, but let me just read Sarna's, this is Sarna's book, description of Enuma Elish, one of the ancient creation stories. It's quite, the story itself is quite lengthy, so I'm not reading word for word from the story, I'm just reading his summary of it. So imagine if this was your creation story, and try to imagine this as your creation story and what it would tell you about you, your gods, and your world. So the Babylonian creation epic tells how before the formation of heaven and earth, nothing existed except water. This primal generative element was identified with Apsu, the male personification of the primeval Sweetwater Ocean, and with his female associate Tiamat, the primordial saltwater ocean, represented as a ferocious monster. So you got two gods here. From the commingling of the two waters, the two gods, were born the divine offspring. The turn gave birth to a second generation of gods. This was successfully. Then came a time when the young gods, through their unremitting and noisy revelry, disturbed the peace of Tiamat and Apsu. The latter decided to destroy the gods, but the evil design was thwarted by the quick action of the all-wise Ea, the earth water god. Tiamat now planned revenge and organized her forces for the attack on the gods. The gods, for their part, requested Marduk to lead them into battle. You got a number of divine characters there. He acceded and provided that he be granted sovereignty over the universe. To this condition, the assembly of the gods readily agreed, and Marduk, invested with the insignia of royalty, became their champion and took up the battle against Tiamat and her helpers. After a fierce battle in which he defeated the enemy forces and slew Tiamat, Marduk sliced the carcass of the god in two and created from one half the firmament of heaven and from the other half the foundation of the earth. So you got heaven and earth created from the carcass of a god. The work of creation having thus begun, Marduk established the heavenly luminaries, in each in its place. From what follows, the gods complained to Marduk that each having now been assigned his or her fixed place and function in the cosmos, there was no relief from their unending toil. So Marduk decided to create man to free the gods from menial labor. And this he proceeded to do, fashioning a human being out of the blood of Kingu, Tiamat's second husband and captain of her army. The gods showed their gratitude to Marduk by building for him a great shrine in the city of Babylon, the gate of God. The epic ends with a description of a testimonial banquet rendered by the gods, at which they recite a hymn of praise to Marduk that confirms his kingship for all eternity. Okay, so if that was your creation story, what does it tell you about you, the world, your gods?
Very violent.
Okay, violence is woven into the
Yeah.
fabric of creation and gods.
Very complicated. I got lost several times.
Yeah.
Tried to refine myself and then got lost again.
Well, maybe that's the point, Debbie. Maybe we're lost in that story.
Yeah. Mhm.
It's, where are we?
I don't think we even matter much in that story.
Yeah.
Right, we're an afterthought, right?
We're just worker bees. We're just
Yeah.
worker bees.
It felt like a third of the way through, we get introduced to Marduk, and then it turns out he's the person, he's the god that becomes the God.
Yeah,
I'm like, how did you get introduced partway through and end up being the God? Felt confused. I felt confused.
mhm,
Well, and there's no purpose, there's no lack of, I mean, there certainly is no plan, but we don't have a purpose. I mean, except I guess to relieve their labor. I mean, we are kind of like, but it's not a very, certainly isn't motivated. It's not
right. There's nothing
motivated.
inspiring about it, is there?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah. Yeah. Let's go to temple and praise Marduk. Okay, so when we won't take the time to read Genesis 1 and 2,
Mhm.
many of us know Genesis 1 and 2. What did Genesis 1 and 2 tell us about our world, our God, ourselves, in contrast to this Enuma Elish story?
So we matter, we're made in God's image,
Hmm.
and everything's good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And there's a certain sense of orderliness about it all, rather than the confusion that this story had.
yeah, yeah. Great degree of order.
It seems to want to account for the various aspects of life that human beings would experience.
Mhm.
All of creation was dependent, mutually dependent on each other.
And it's interesting, the creation by divine fiat, God speaks, things come into existence. He doesn't have to slice the carcass of another God to create what is.
Mhm.
Yeah, God's not fighting other gods up there.
Yeah, that's right.
Not only were we created in God's image, but we were created to have relationship with him.
Yeah, yeah. So all of that and so much more remain intact, even if we don't take it as a literal historical scientific document. Even if we accept what the vast majority of scientists around the world accept, that this Earth and universe are billions of years old, and life came through evolution. So,
Yeah, and if you take what most biblical scholars believe to be the origin of Genesis chapters 1 to 11, the Babylonian creation precedes it. I mean, it's written, it's created
mhm,
before it. And that makes sense to me. I mean, but then the important thing becomes Genesis is written in reaction to it in a way.
mhm.
And so you're looking for, which is the question you ask, but that's the question that the text keeps asking,
Mhm.
is how is this different?
Yeah,
What is the Hebrew account telling you that the Babylonian account didn't?
mhm. Yeah,
You may be getting to this question, or maybe it doesn't get answered in the book at all. But I think the question that I've been asked from kids, and I've been asked myself, is given the evolution of human beings, when or what triggered the fact that the knowledge that we have souls?
Yes.
Kathy, you had that question
Kathy
too?
has the answer to that question.
Or you just had that question?
You're just gonna keep the answer to yourself, Kathy?
how did it seem I had that answer? I don't know.
I think she was saying she had the same question,
Yeah.
maybe.
So.
Yeah.
Can you state the question again?
Yeah, okay, I accept there was evolution, and I accept that God created us, and in us, we have this sense of souls. So where along the evolution route does, was the most advanced monkey, primate, did that have a soul? Did Neanderthals have souls? When was it that souls got into the mix? I guess that's it's a question I have that nobody's tried to answer as far as I know.
Yeah, she doesn't address that question in this book.
Mhm.
That's a really intriguing question. If we do follow the timeline of evolution,
Mhm.
when in that timeline might we envision this unique relationship
Mhm.
between God and human forming? And
Because as we talk about things like when does a child receive a soul, the whole abortion question kind of ask that question. It's like, was it they get the soul when they were conceived, or does it souls when you take your first breath, or when does the soul enter into the human development? And that seems like we politically we've based an awful lot on that question. So where along, I guess someone who's anti-evolutionary would say, well, no, it's clear. That's the reason evolution just confuses us.
We're not in Texas, so we don't
I know, we don't have clear answers.
Yeah,
But
there are several chapters, 2 or 3 chapters, where she traces out the broad timeline of Neanderthals, Denisovans, I'm not sure how you say that correctly, and Homo sapiens, modern humans. So those 3. So I don't know. It's intriguing because the book is a science book. Mostly, she doesn't take out questions like that, but it is an intriguing question. Yeah. I think this is a helpful quote from near the end of the book. So she says, what does a science accepting person do with Genesis? Ignore it? Not at all. Honoring Genesis means recognizing its genre. Honoring Genesis means listening to its ancient voice. Trying to force a modern understanding of science into an ancient document misses lots of boats. Not only do we miss the message intended by the original authors and compilers, we force the Bible to be something it is not, a scientifically accurate natural history of Earth. When we read Genesis, we don't learn about modern science, but we do learn about God. For me as a Christian, the Bible has authority because it testifies to Jesus. The Bible has authority because it bears witness to people trying to live as God's people. The Bible has authority in how I live my life, but the Bible is not an authority about the facts of modern science. It was never meant to be. The Bible is telling a different story. The Bible gives us the answers to who and why of creation. Science answers the how and when. So I think that's an interesting way of framing the 2 fields there. Scripture, faith, giving us the answers to who and why, and science, the answers to how and when. Any other thoughts or questions?
Well, Sandy's not going to bring this up, but she does want to know whether there are baby dinosaurs on the Ark.
There is a bit in the book about that, because young Earth, old Earth creationists try to address that issue, and the logical difficulties of making room for dinosaurs on the Ark, and so some posit that they were, I guess these are mostly the young Earth creationists, posit that the dinosaur eggs were brought on the Ark.
during that time, yeah.
But she argues that the story of the ark is not literal, and therefore
Right.
we don't have to worry about making the dinosaurs fit on the ark.
I don't think there's any evidence that dinosaurs and Homo sapiens existed at the same time. So
That's what I was thinking.
Yep.
I think that they can't be on the ark because they're already dead.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
Yeah.
But should we bring back the woolly mammoth? Did everybody see that article? That's the second time I've
Yeah.
seen that about people. Should we bring back the woolly mammoth? I'm like, I've seen this movie and it ends bad.
You think we learn our lesson?
no, never.
Apparently we don't.
All right, so again, I recommend the book. It's a new book out in the field. It's well written and covers a lot of ground that you might find interesting. So thanks for the conversation tonight.
Mhm.
And next week is character. Okay.
Okay.
Good
Thank
night.
you. Bye. Good night.
Bye.